Welcome to We Zombie City Tours. Advanced civilizations used to live where you live. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight. Our ancestors were pyramid builders, experts at transporting and building with heavy stone, aka masonry. Their faces and their logos are engraved in stone all over our cities, and their pyramids still surround us. Now here's some more ridiculous claims. There's a single God that created you, me, the world, and all things in it, and he created a specific location of land that he deems better than all other locations of land. And he promised this land to a man named Abraham and all his children for forever. This is why we've all heard the phrase, the promised land. And the land we currently call USA is the land God promised to Abraham, and our cities and our mountains are actually the proof of it. And God promises that it will remain the most blessed land on earth as long as its inhabitants follow Jesus Christ. And if they don't, it gets cursed, destroyed, and given away to somebody else. So let's look at the fruits. Is the most choice land prospering, or is it being deteriorated and given away? If you're curious, enjoy the vids. If you're not, I'm sure I'll hear from you in the comments telling me how dumb I am. Either way, dig deeper, explore your city, and most importantly, explore your God. Ask him questions and study his word. Welcome, zombies. In this video, we're taking a look at we're going to take a look at a few different places, but mainly we're going to start in Chicago, Illinois, because that's what led me to the rest of the things we're going to talk about in this video. I unfortunately didn't have a ton of time when I was in Chicago, so it was just drive through and look at a few things, and I took a couple pictures out of my car window as I was driving, and there were two things in particular that just really shocked me. I mean, there's tons of stuff in Chicago. There was so much more I wanted to get a closer look at, but there were two things I saw a pretty close look at just driving by them, and I was like, I definitely need to look into those two things. And one of those is this structure right here. What is this? Why is this? What is this about? We're going to talk about it. It's a water tower, supposedly. We're going to look at this and learn a little bit about it, and also take a look at some other water towers that tell a mighty story, that really tell us a lot more about where this architecture comes from, who it's related to, who built it, all that sort of stuff. And then the second main thing I noticed is this video right here. I'm taking out of the sunroof as I'm driving because I saw those three men up there, and I was like, wow, who are those three men holding swords, robed and holding swords? But then as I got closer, the bottom of the building was blocked by a different building, but below these men, as I got closer to it, that other building was out of the way, and I could see the building that the men are on. I could see lower on that building. And this is what I saw, and this was the main thing. I was like, it just shocked me. I was like, what was that I just saw? And unfortunately, I needed to keep driving, so I couldn't stop. But this right here, and I'll show a couple better pictures of it. Let me pause this and roll it back just a little bit right there. I mean, this is just looking straight up Egyptian right here. Like, no difference at all. And I'll talk more about this in a second. When I say Egyptian, I'm talking about the style. I'm not talking about the country in the Middle East that's now called Egypt. I'm going to explain why when I'm saying Egyptian, I'm not talking about that country. I'm going to explain that a little bit later on, but this just looks like old, ancient Egyptian people, and we're going to take a little closer look at that and some other ancient Egyptian, but we'll do a little better job of explaining who exactly it is on all these buildings. But man, just wild artwork right here in Chicago. And you can even see there's Egyptian writings at the top of it right here. Like it is just fully Egyptian as far as we think about Egyptian goes. And then there was one more interesting thing that I saw as I was driving, which I'm not gonna go into this anymore in this video, but there's just stuff like this in Chicago that there's so much stone architecture that's amazing. But this right here, I just wanted to pause and show you guys, because I know a lot of you will just like to see this. But if you look underneath this facade stone, this tower skyscraper type building right here looks to be just very, very old brick underneath it, which I know we see a lot of the time. And when you go way back into the Old Testament, it talks about, like, just after Noah's flood, for example, when Noah and his kids were given the whole earth, it says they built with brick and slime, brick and mortar. And all the ancient architecture is always stone, but we don't build with stone. So there were some seriously advanced stonemason civilizations that were here before us, And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about who they were in just a second in this video. But that stone mural that we saw, I think they call it a frieze, F-R-I-E-Z-E is like the word they use to describe those, like a horizontal stone mural. But that Egyptian mural, stone mural, is on the building that is now called Intercontinental Chicago Magnificent Mile Building. It's a hotel now in Chicago. Like, just a hotel with some crazy Egyptian artwork on the outside of it. So here's a closer look at that building. It's got this just big tower coming off of it, big dome on top right here, which we'll talk about in just a second also. And then down here at the bottom, you can see this is where I took that video. I tried to get a shot of this mural right here. And above it, you can see these 3 robed men holding swords. And then also you can notice over here, there's another of those same horizontal stone murals. And it was actually hard to even find I didn't really find a super clear image of it, which was kind of interesting as I hunted around on the internet. Usually I'm able to find some pretty good images, but this one was a little bit tougher, but we got, enough to look at. That's still going to be helpful for us. And it says that the ceremony to lay the cornerstone was held on November 5th, 1928, and then the building was completed 1929. It's a 1-year timeline on this building. I think maybe even somewhere else I heard 11 months, but let's just go with a year, and that's ridiculous. It's just an absolutely ridiculous timeline for a completely stone skyscraper like this. 1 year with Egyptian stone artwork and robed men holding swords, just completely ancient symbolism. And it's definitely calling this stuff, ancient artwork right here, relief carvings in ancient Assyrian style. And this is going to make so much more sense when I break this down. Like, just please hang around to let me explain the things in this video. It's going to be amazing to see it. It says the theme of these panels was inspired by the history of construction of any building. This is their story for these, and I'll show you more of them in a second, but these ancient stone Egyptian murals on the outside, the inspiration for those was just, it's all just about the history of construction of any building. No, it's not. And there's 3 different panels that they say. There's a south one, a west one, and a north one. So they say the south panel, they call it contribution, signifies the getting together of treasures for the construction of the building. The west panel is a ruler shown with his counselors, and an architect is shown bringing in a model of the building plan. The north panel shows the consecration of the building after it has been built. A priest is also sacrificing a white bull whose blood will be mixed with crushed grapes and poured into the earth. That's the stuff we talk about when we're talking about constructing a building. Animal sacrifice and priests? I don't think so. I think that's the stuff that the Bible talks about, and that's the stuff the Old Testament civilizations did. This is going to make so much more sense when I fully break down the people on these buildings. And then those 3 men that I saw holding swords, it says those are 3 Samarian warriors also carved into the facade. And then it says, extending the Moorish imagery, the building is topped by a gold painted dome. So we're talking about Samaria, we're talking about the Moors, and up here we were talking about Assyria. And then we've got priests and animal sacrifice. But this is all just inspired by the history of construction of any building. This is just like normal. Like, if you're going to build a building, this is a great way to depict construction. It's so I'm going to call it dumb. It's dumb. These are really silly stories. And then the people that built it, the club, which is connected to Freemasonry, and I'm not going to get into all that right now, but it's connected to Freemasonry, not the actual building of it, but the stories behind it. And it says that club, the Freemasonry club that supposedly built it, went bankrupt in 1934. So 1929 it was completed, and then 4 or 5 years later, we're bankrupt now. And then some interesting demolition right here. It says, in the Hall of Lions, workers at first utilize a process called corn husk blasting to strip away the many layers of paint from the marble walls. This is something I've talked about a lot in my videos. Oftentimes these buildings are just dull and gray, and that is not what they looked like when they were in their prime condition. They were extremely colorful and adorned with amazing colors, and also gold and copper and silver, like all this stuff just everywhere on it. But they've been heavily pillaged. A lot of them just straight up demolished and tumbled into the dirt. But when you go into these buildings and you see stuff that looks like scraped away, or like there was possibly something more beautiful there, that is the case. And it's not often that they say it, but they are hinting at that here. I don't think corn husk blasting is like the real thing they used to do it, but it says that they stripped layers off of the walls. So if there were precious materials, if there were ancient drawings, ancient murals, ancient writings, strip it off, strip it off, strip it off, strip it off, get rid of it, pillage it. And that's what they're saying right here. They stripped off layers of what they're saying is paint, but could just be very well gold. And they stripped it off the marble walls. When, however, it was determined that a single marble column would require a ton of ground corn cobs, restorers decided to scrub away the paint by hand. So it's a bit of a silly story, but it's a story that is admitting to stripping and pillaging the walls and scraping them down, so what was there is not there and can't be seen anymore. Which is why I was so surprised by seeing these types of murals on the outside of it, because oftentimes, and you'll notice if you pay attention to these buildings, you'll see kind of like a square like this on the exterior of the building, but the inside of it will just be blank. And it's not because it was blank, it's because it's been filed down and scraped down, so it's not showing these types of things on the buildings anymore. For whatever reason, these ones are still on this building, and it's amazing to see. And as you can see right here, this is just straight up ancient artwork right here. All people holding very ancient symbols that are completely foreign to us. They're all wearing robes. They all look very much like what we think of as ancient Egyptians or ancient Israelites, which we'll talk more about in just a second. And then over here, you've got this priest right here, and then another guy kneeling down, another priest right here. And here's the white bull that they were talking about on the altar being sacrificed. And then right up here at the top, you can see there's an eagle depicted with its wings spread open. And I point this out in most of my videos because this stone eagle shows up on almost all of this architecture. And the reason that there's an eagle and it still remains the symbol of these lands is because the land now called United States of America is because God made a promise anciently with a people, with a man named Abraham and all of his children, that they would have a specific location of land for forever, and that land's called the Promised Land. And they were in bondage to the Egyptians at one point, and God escaped them out of the Pharaoh's captivity and bondage. That's Moses taking them out, parting the Red Sea, that whole story. And then he said, after he did that, he says in Exodus 19:4 in the Old Testament, "Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, how he drowned them in the sea, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself." So the eagle and the eagle's wings is the depiction, is the symbol of God bringing his promised covenant people, the Israelites, out of Egypt to him in the Promised Land in the covenant location. I'm going to break this down more thoroughly in a second, but just wanted to point that out right here, that once again, we see the stone eagle depicted, and right here it's alongside very Egyptian and Israelite looking people, along with animal sacrifice. And I've got a little section here to show you animal sacrifice depicted in stone all over the United States of America. And how would that even be possible? If the cowboys, the pilgrims, the coal miners, if they're who built this architecture in the 1700s, 1800s, how could there possibly be animal sacrifice depicted in stone all over these buildings? That makes zero sense. And there's nothing that these people in these stories ever say about, there's no good reasoning behind, like they don't even really try and explain it. It's just like, yeah, animal sacrifice is depicted. So right here, for example, this is the Nebraska State Capitol, huge stone tower right here with extremely ancient artwork. You'll see at the top of it right here, there's the Egyptian eagle depicted. And if we come right here, we see this man clutching a sword, wearing a robe, bunch of other symbols right here I'm not gonna get into right now, but right here, you'll see that my take on this is Adam and Eve right here. So Adam's clutching the sword of truth. They're both wearing robes, robes of righteousness, robes of the priesthood, and Eve has her hand to the square, her right hand, and then in her left hand it has a lamb, and that's a sacrificial lamb right there. Also right here, just a little bit lower, you can see up here's the lamb, and then right here you have a bullock depicted, which is what we just saw over here, a bullock depicted being sacrificed on an altar. This is in San Diego, California. You'll see that there's this lamb on an altar right here. So I'm saying, like, dude, there's no way we have stone architecture looking super, super old with animal sacrifice depicted all over it, and it comes from the cowboys and coal miners and pilgrims. Impossible. A much, much more accurate and honest and reasonable explanation for that is this is leftover architecture from civilizations in ancient times that did do animal sacrifice. And also in this same stonework, you got the eagle coming out of this bowl vase type thing with his wings spread open. Another one in San Diego, California right here, you've got the all-seeing eye on top of a book right there. And then right here, you've got another, this one's a ram on top of an altar. And we see the same thing going on right here in Chicago. Here's a look at the stone mural that caught my eye. This is one of the other ones on the building. It's kind of at a tough angle right here. Again, it was just strange that I couldn't find any like really clear pictures of this. I mean, I could have got them if I got out of my car, but yeah, just they were kind of hard to find online. So you've got this pharaoh type king right here sitting on his throne, and it's hard to tell, but the back of his throne is like eagle's wings. And then you got this human eagle hybrid type thing right here. And then, I mean, there's just a lot going on. You got the sun right here depicting sun worship. They're all robed. This guy's got like a spear in one hand and arrows on his back. You see a couple bulls right here. Up here, you've got the eagle's wings flying, but then there's also like this other guy flying. I mean, a lot of this, I just have no idea what's going on. But some of it, you can see and understand. Like here's the eagle again, stone eagle. And then back here, you can see that there's this temple type building depicted with a dome right in the middle, the pillars on the front, a couple towers on the side, very, very similar to a lot of the architecture that we see all over this country. And I would say this is like describing, like, this isn't a civilization that didn't live in this country. This is the civilization that did live in this country and build this stuff. And then you'll see also on the bowl right here, tough to make out, but there's some ancient writings and markings right there. Incredible stone artwork right here. Like extremely intricate, like expert artwork right here. Engraved in stone on a stone skyscraper in Chicago. And then here's a closer look at those, what do they call them? Samarian warriors, I think is what they call them. And it's just robed men holding the sword of truth. And then I came across this very interesting picture and story right here, where this is the very top of the building that we've just been looking at, has this big dome on top and an airship flying behind it. And I tried to get more information, but the only information about this is what it says right here. It says the Intercontinental Chicago's golden cupola was indeed designed to moor airships with a chimney and extension pole. And you've got this photo right here showing an airship flying right by it. In other words, the top of this building was designed for airships to dock on top of. But then it proceeds to say, however, no airships ever moored to the roof of any building in the United States. It turns out that Zeppelin masts were neither safe nor practical. What they did offer was some great publicity for skyscrapers. And then if we come right here to docking on the Empire State Building, says despite plans for a mooring station, only one airship ever docked at the Empire State Building. So to me, this is just the controllers lying when it seems pretty obvious that the tops of these buildings in many cases were airship docking stations, and airship and blimp travel very much a real thing in the past. Maybe even in the somewhat recent past, but the story always goes that no, it was never really a thing. Just like maybe a little bit, like right here, just saying for publicity, for skyscrapers, whatever, but it doesn't make sense. But it's interesting that also right here, it says Count Dr. Eckner and his Zeppelin visit our club by air. And remember this building, if we go back right here, let me scroll up. So it's the It was originally the home of the Medina Athletic Club, which was a Freemasonry thing. And so the little piece of this photo right here says this guy Zeppelin is visiting the club by air, like it's about to dock on top of this and come visit the club. So it really does seem quite clear that these airships were real and they were docking on top of these skyscrapers, which is pretty amazing. Okay, now we're gonna talk about this Chicago water tower, and this is gonna lead us into explaining who those people who the Egyptian people on that skyscraper really are. So this is that water tower, and I showed you a picture of it already that I took when I was there. And it's by no means like the tallest building or even close to in that area, but it was really like mainly the bottom of it right here, just very, very heavy stonework, very castle looking, lots of like spires and towers, and then this huge main tower that shoots off of it. It just really caught my eye when I drove by it. Here's an old picture of it, and there is this other building over here that it's attached to, but now there's a black asphalt road that goes in between the two, so they seem detached, but it's definitely just one building that's probably all part of a much bigger, grander building that is the whole city of Chicago, that probably all has its own proper foundation. But it says it survived the Great Chicago Fire, another fire of course, while adjacent buildings burned to the ground. And this is the fire photo that they give us, and I don't even think this, like, I think this is just heavily photoshopped. I just don't think this is a real photo. I think the building's real, but there's some story for whatever reason that all this around it got blown up and only this was right here. I don't know. I just find those stories very sketchy, but once again, we got another fire story. And it's the second oldest water tower in the United States after the Louisville, Kentucky water tower, which we're gonna look at in just a second. It says, ironically, the pumping station, because it's a water tower, right, stopped working during the fire. The roof, not made of limestone, caught fire, and pumps stopped working, and it stopped supplying water to fight the fire. After the fire, the water tower temporarily stored books donated by Queen Victoria and others to replace the burnt up ones. What books were in this water tower previously? And then now we got more books in there donated by Queen Victoria. Yeah, let's house some books from Queen Victoria, the empire we escaped from. Let's house them in this water tower right after a fire. Makes perfect sense. The tower has undergone 2 renovations: renovation, renewal, preservation, conservation. These are all words for pillaging and destruction. The first took place during a 3-year period, 1913 and 1916. At that time, many of the limestone blocks were replaced, pillaging, demolition. The second renovation occurred in 1978. The renovation consisted mostly of interior changes with only minor changes made to the exterior of the building, more pillaging. Okay, now we look at the Louisville, Kentucky water tower. Amazing. And also another ancient style building, stone building attached to it, just like we saw in the Chicago one over here, where you've got that same similar style building attached to the one in Chicago. This one is the oldest ornamental water tower in the world. The industrial nature of its pumping station was disguised in the form of a Roman temple complex. Or was this a temple complex? And this water tower story is a bit of a silly story. After several devastating fires in the 1850s, bro, the 1800s had so many fires. And I mentioned this in a previous video, but I think oftentimes what these fires are saying is not necessarily always like something caught on fire from like a match or a cigar, like they like to say that stuff a lot of times, but these could be military firings, like military demolition, like under fire. That type of destruction, I think, is oftentimes what these fires are referring to, but kind of in a coded way, transforming it almost into and then it says it, private investors showed little interest and it passed some hands, and then finally it transformed into an almost completely government-owned corporation. And this happens, very common story that they tell us is that, oh yeah, this billionaire owned it, or this group owned it, the Freemasons owned it, and then now it's in the hands of the government. It's almost always the story. And then a tornado in 1890 irreparably changed the water tower. The tornado destroyed all but 2 of the 10 statues that were on the pedestals, and then it ceased pumping operations in 1909. So more demolition and destruction and decommissioning it. And I'm not going to get into this right now, but the people behind this stuff, they have some serious big boy toys, and weather engineering is a real thing. So I don't know, is this real? Was there really a tornado that went through here and destroyed it? Are they blaming bombing some stuff on a tornado? Did they create a tornado? All of that I think is possible. We're going to talk about these statues now. These are there's 10 statues above the first level, each standing on a pedestal over a Corinthian column. I'm going to show you another Corinthian column in just a second, the tallest one in the world. But these are the sculptures on top of this tower right here. And surprise, it's the stone woman once again all over this architecture. As always, she shows up all over the place, all over the stone architecture. And also, who do we find on this stone architecture right here? A Lamanite. I'll talk more about that in a second. If you've been watching my previous videos, you'll have a good idea of who the Lamanites are. But once again, another Lamanite right here, axe in his hand, got more hair on the head than usual, but mostly naked, a little bit of something around his waist, and an axe in his hand. Also right next to the stone woman depicted several times. And the story that they're given right here is this one represents spring, this one represents summer, autumn, winter, and then some of them, like right here, are Greek goddesses, Hebe, like whoever. And then right here, the Lamanite, they're saying, is an Indian hunter and a dog. So you got this stone Greek goddesses and everything like that, and just a random Indian with a dog. Or, like I've said in previous videos, is this the stone woman being the symbol of God's covenant with his people? And the Lamanite is from the Nephite and Lamanite civilization, the continuation of that ancient covenant that he made in ancient times. And that's why we see all this symbolism everywhere. Hang with me just a second longer and I'll clear that up even more right now, because we got to look at the Grand Avenue Water Tower, this one right here, which is also the world's tallest Corinthian column, located in St. Louis, Missouri. To fully explain this water tower, which is going to explain who those people were depicted, those Egyptian style people on that Chicago building, we need to read a little bit from the Old Testament and about this ancient covenant that God made with his people. Genesis 12:7 says, "The Lord appeared unto a man named Abraham, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land, and there builded he an altar unto the Lord." So there's an ancient promise that God made to this man named Abraham. And he said to Abraham, I'm giving you this specific location of land. That's often, we refer to that as the promised land or the covenant land. And God promised that land to Abraham and his children for forever. And then Abraham had a son named Isaac, and then Isaac had a son named Jacob. And Jacob received that same covenant, that same promise from God. And so in Genesis 28:1, we start to see this. It says, Isaac called Jacob and blessed him. And then Genesis 28:4 says, I give thee the blessing of Abraham and to thy seed, that you may inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, the land which God gave unto Abraham. So I'm just showing us here that originally God made this promise with Abraham, that he would have a specific location of land for all of his children. And then that got promised to one of his children named Jacob, and that covenant, that promise would continue through Jacob and all of his children. And then it says that Isaac sent away Jacob. So now Jacob's leaving and going somewhere. It says Jacob went out from Beersheba, just showing us that he's traveling somewhere now. And then there's this very interesting verse in Genesis 28:11 where it says, he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took the stones of that place and put them for his pillows. There's two different parts we're going to talk about right here. The lighted upon a certain place we're going to talk about, but we're also going to talk about how he took stones of that place, and it says he put them for his pillows, and that he lay down in that place to sleep. So I think there's some just translation going on here where it's saying he took stones of that place and put them for pillows. Oftentimes, because we're told that these were poor dirt rag people in the scriptures, we're told that from churches, from entertainment industries, from leaders. But when you actually read the text for what it's saying, it's not saying these were poor dirt rag people. It's saying these were very rich, advanced masons building mighty cities of stone, gold, silver, copper, brass, tons of precious things. and that they had huge mining projects and huge, like, amazing transportation to move all the weight of all this stone around. Like, the scriptures are actually saying these things. And if you go to my We Zombie Rod of Iron channel right here and go to playlist, I have this playlist right here called The Stone Woman. And I go through very thoroughly all the scriptures, and I show us, and a lot of other things, that the scriptures truly say these were advanced, rich stonemasonry civilizations, very different than how it's depicted and shown to us nowadays through images and videos and all of that. And so when it's saying that Jacob right here took stones and put them for pillows and lay down in that place to sleep, I think what it's saying right here, and I'll show you this more in a second, is that he built something out of stones. He constructed masonry, he did stone masonry right here. He's a masterful mason, and he built himself a place to sleep. Okay, and then the other part of this verse, it says he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. So he was traveling somewhere, and it says that he lighted upon a place. That word lighted is very interesting. And then he tarried there all night because the sun was set. Understand this might seem far-fetched, but I think what has happened is we've been put under deception, where we've been taught and told things that aren't true to keep us from seeing the truth. And I think anciently these people were much more advanced than us. And you can see that in the proof of the architecture that still exists from ancient times in our world, and even in the United States of America, especially in the United States of America. And it says that, so it says he lighted upon a certain place. And so I would just propose that maybe he's traveling by light. How or what that is, how exactly that works, not sure. Maybe an airship can be powered by light. Maybe there's portals or teleporting stuff that is actually real. But either way, it says that he lighted upon a certain place and that he had to stop because the sun was set. To me, that sounds like he was traveling using the sun's light. And since the sun went down, he couldn't travel anymore. So now he stopped traveling, and he took the stones of this place. He practiced masonry. He built a stone structure to sleep in. And that sounds far-fetched, but as we keep reading right here, it's like, maybe that is really what it's trying to tell us. Genesis 28:12 says, he dreamed and beheld a ladder set upon the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and he saw the angels of God ascending and descending on it. I cover this on my We Zombie Rod of Iron channel, proof of the firmament, the whole story about we're on some inside out hurling through outer space water balloon and asteroids and planets. I don't think any of that's real. I think that's just more hoax. And I think God is actually directly above us. And that's why Jacob right here is seeing a ladder set up on earth, reaching to heaven, reaching up, and then there's angels coming up and down on it. And then it continues, and it says that he saw the Lord standing above that ladder, directly above us. And that the Lord said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed. So now God is talking down to Jacob and saying, where you're at right now, the promise that I promised to Abraham and Isaac, I'm giving it to you now. And the land where you're at right now is that land that I promised to them, and I'm promising it to you and to all of your seed for forever. You're the continuation of this ancient covenant that I made with your father Abraham. So Jacob is given the promised land, or the covenant land, the covenant location. And then it says, Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he goes, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. So he didn't know exactly where he was at, or that this was the covenant special place. But now that he had this dream, he sees the ladder, angels are coming in and out of this place, and then God's at the very top, and God speaks to him and says, this is the special place, Jacob, and it's yours, and for all of your seed for forever. And he continues, and Jacob says, I was afraid, and I said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So he's describing this location, that he now knows what this location is. He's giving us more information on it, and he's saying it's the house of God and it's the gate of heaven. Some sort of portal connection between our world and the world above, where God and all of his angels reside. So we're talking about a house and a gate right here. And I'm going to tease this for just a second and then come back to it. This is the Gateway Arch. It's called a gate in St. Louis, Missouri. Another thing that you could say right here is this is God's chosen location for his house, his throne on earth. And Jacob marked this location with a very specific type of architecture. It says in Genesis 28:18, Jacob rose up early in the morning, took the stone that he put for his pillows, and set it up for a pillar. So this is where I say, okay, oftentimes people think the Jacob putting up stones for a pillow was literally like he just took some stones off the ground and laid his head on them. Not very comfortable, probably would have been better off grabbing a bush or something like that. But if that was true, now he's taking those stones and setting them up for a pillar. So like, how tall was his pillar? Like this tall? Because if he just had some stones for his head and now he put those into a pillow, it's not a very, or into a pillar, I mean, that's not a very tall pillar by any means. It maybe isn't enough to create a proper pillar by any means. So that's where I say the translation for he put up stones for a pillow sounds like he built something out of stone to sleep in. And now he's taking that stone and he's putting it up for a pillar. That if he actually built a structure to sleep in out of stones, now that's enough stone to take those stones and create a pillar. And this is a pillar, the world's tallest Corinthian column, the Grand Ave Water Tower in St. Louis, Missouri. And it is huge. That's why I pulled up this picture with these cranes, because this is a very, very tall and very heavy pillar right here. The world's tallest. And these guys on these cranes is just to paint it, just to get some paint up there, not to construct it, nothing like that, just to paint it. You got to bring in these big cranes. And this is the flower work on top of it, and it is extremely big, and it is 100% stone. So this is a very, very, very heavy pillar right here. And then he tells us a little bit more about this location, this house of God, this gate between heaven and earth that he just marked with the pillar. He gives us even more information about it. He says in Genesis 28:19, he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. So Luz in Spanish means light. And I'm not going to go into this right now, but God is light. He is the light and life of the world, as it says in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so he's saying at the beginning, Adam's time, this place was called Luz. But right now, Jacob is giving it the name Bethel. And so Bethel and Luz are the same city. They're just known by different names at different times. Bethel is what Jacob's naming it at that moment, and Luz is what he's saying is what it used to be called. And specifically at the beginning is when it was called that, at the first, Adam's time period. And so like I just said, Luz means light, and light equals God. So this is the city of light, or the city of God. And Bethel, the translation for that, also means house of God. If we look right here, Bethel in Hebrew translates to house of El, or house of God. So all these names are saying this Luz Bethel location is God's house on earth. It's the gate between heaven and earth. It's the most special location. And it's marked with Jacob's pillar. And it's the covenant location promised to Jacob and Abraham. And then even before that, Noah and Adam had the whole earth. And this was very likely their central spot, because it is the most holiest, most house of God spot, gate between heaven and earth location. So that's probably, scriptures don't exactly say this, but it's pretty safe to say that that's where Noah and Adam also were. So the city of Luz, or Bethel, is the Jacob's pillar location, the ladder that goes between heaven and earth location, and the gate between heaven and earth location. Genesis 28:22 says, "This stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house." Very clear that Jacob marked God's house on earth location with a pillar. Now, if we come back over here to the Grand Avenue Water Tower, it says this is located in St. Louis, Missouri. Even still has that Luce name connected to it. The staircase inside of it was replaced by a what? A vertical ladder. So not only is there the world's tallest Corinthian column right here, but there's also a vertical ladder inside of it. What are the chances? But let's keep going, because there's more. It's the tallest freestanding Corinthian column in the world. If Jacob marked God's house on earth location with a pillar, it was probably a pretty mighty pillar. Maybe the tallest in the whole world. Probably is. and there's a vertical ladder inside of it. What are the chances? And then there's also a gate nearby called the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. And right in front of that gate, an ancient temple, altar, huge dome on it, stone structure. This right here is the Jacob's Pillar, the St. Louis Water Tower, Grand Ave Water Tower, and then right over here is the gate, the Gateway Arch. They're only about 3 miles away, and they both sit on a mighty ancient river called the Mississippi River. So right down here, you've got the Gateway Arch, and then right over here, you've got the Jacob's Pillar, Grand Ave Water Tower. Very close to each other, both sitting on this mighty river, both in a location called St. Louis. Louis, light, Louis, God, God is light, and saint meaning holy. And due to its size and importance, the Mississippi River has been named the Mighty Mississippi River, or the Mighty Mississippi. And it also serves as the boundary line between the western and eastern halves of the country. And it says this is reflected in the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, which was designed to symbolize the opening of the West. Okay, so it's talking about east to west right here. It's saying that the Mississippi River is a boundary of east to west. And it's also reflected in the gate that sits right there. And the gate is symbolizing the opening of the West, the moving west from the east. And when we read in Matthew 24:27, this is very much exactly how it talks about God's second coming. It says, as the light cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man, of Jesus Christ, returning to earth, returning to his throne location, his house of God location, from the east to the west. And what do we see? We read that story of Jacob's Pillar and marking the house of God location, and then right here in St. Louis, Missouri, there's the world's tallest Corinthian column, and there's a gate and the mighty river, all of it talking about this east to west thing going on. And then on top of that, if you continue reading about the Gateway Arch, Smith is like one of the guys who designed it, if we're going to go with the story. But it says Smith's daughter related that when people would tell him we needed more practical things, so people would look at the Gateway Arch and be like, why don't we do something more practical? Like, this isn't really serving any purpose. Like, why not spend the money on something more practical? The guy's response is spiritual things were equally important. Oh, so the Gateway Arch is about spiritual things? Yeah, it actually is. So is that Grand Ave Water Tower. Both Jacob's Pillar, the gate between heaven and earth, the house of God on earth, his throne location, his ancient covenant and the promised land, the covenant location, St. Louis, Missouri. It's all right there. It's all telling the story. So the Mississippi River is the mightiest river in the covenant promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and also Joseph of Egypt. This is the river right here that runs all the way down through here, and all of the branches of water that shoot off of it, those are called tributaries, and that is what creates the Mississippi Valley. So the Mississippi River and all the waterways that branch off of it, that is what is referred to as the river's valley. This is not to be confused with the state of Mississippi down here. There's a state called Mississippi down here, which is its own thing, but the Mississippi River Valley is all of this, which is basically all of the United States, minus the western United States from the Rocky Mountains and over. And this book right here, called Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley referring to all of these waterways that branch off the Mississippi River, talks about ancient civilizations settling all along these waterways and building hills, mounds, mounts, and mountains, also known as pyramids. And this book is very dumbed down, but it still does admit that there were civilizations here building pyramids along the Mississippi Valley waterways. And it even mentions some of the materials they used, like gold, silver, copper, stuff like that. But again, it dumbs it way down. This is a book, by the way, written by the federal government and the Smithsonian Institute in the 1840s or 1850s. They got together and created a deceptive book. It has some truths in it. It does say they built mounds, pyramids along these waterways, but it dumbs it down. It still talks about them as if they were a dirt, poor, rag type people. But it does admit that along these waterways there were civilizations building pyramids. And the full truth of it is they weren't poor dirt rag people that just turned some dirt into mounds. They were advanced masonry civilizations building huge stone pyramid and stone castle cities, and pyramids and their castles and their palaces and synagogues and towers were all connected and serving as one entire design of how they lived back then. And this is one image inside of the book, and there's many other ones where that you just, if you read this book, if you crack it open and go through it and you look at the images, knowing that they've dumbed it down and they're trying to trick you but still admitting the truth within it, it's very insightful if you look at it that way. If you're just going to read it and believe everything they say, you'll still find it interesting, because it's like, wow, people built mounds, pyramids in these areas anciently, but it's still going to tell you they were just poor dirt rag people. But right here they've got like an obelisk layout, which is like poor dirt rag people are building obelisks, but it's just actually what I said. These were advanced stone masonry civilizations that lived here before us, and now we know that it is the location that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So St. Louis, Missouri is the central location, the house of God location, the gate between heaven and earth, the symbol of east to west, God's second coming from east to west. It will be the place where God sits on his throne. Has Jacob's pillar, a vertical ladder, a gate, and a mighty river. And its name is St. Louis, which is holy light, and it was called light or Luz in the beginning, and light is God. And it's also, Jacob named it Bethel, which is translated means house of God. And of course, when you go back and look at it, no stone for roads. All this stone architecture up right here surrounding the pillar, and this huge stone pillar itself, but no stone for roads, just dirt roads. Didn't know how to pave roads, didn't have transportation to move stones around, but all this got constructed on dirt roads. So now, to tie a nice bow on the end of this video, we need to talk about Israel, the real one, because what we're told nowadays is the promised land is over in the Middle East, and there's a country over there called Israel, and the capital city of that place is called Jerusalem. And that's the special place that God promised to Abraham and Jacob and Joseph. It's not. That's a hoax location. As you can see right here, Israel over there, the state of Israel, was created in 1948 by the United Nations. I break this down super thoroughly in my Stone Woman presentation on my Wee Zombie Rod of Iron channel. I talk about the United Nations and how they're just completely nefarious. All they do is lie and deceive, and they're about enslaving people. But they brand themselves as like peace and prosperity, and they're not about that at all. They're just lies and deception. And they were the ones who created Israel in the Middle East in 1948, and before that it was called British Palestine. So literally they just set up a hoax location over there, and they've been telling the whole world that that's the special place that God promised to Abraham, and it's not. That's a lie. Jacob's pillar marks that actual spot. The gate marks that actual spot. The land promised to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph of Egypt is the land we now call the United States of America. The central God's house location is St. Louis, Missouri. Genesis 35:10, God changed Jacob's name, and what did he change his name to? Israel. Thy name is Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name, and he called his name Israel. Israel is not a country. Israel is a man named Jacob. Jacob marked the house of God location, the promised land location, with a pillar. So you could just say Israel, because his name got changed to Israel. Israel marked the promised land with a pillar, the world's tallest Corinthian column that is in the land now called United States of America. Middle East thing, 100% hoax. Jacob is Israel. So we're talking about Israel's pillar in St. Louis, Missouri. Jacob's children is the house of Israel, or the tribes of Israel, or the Israelites. So when we're talking about Israelites from the Bible, we're talking about the people that lived in the location that Jacob or Israel marked with his pillar, which is the land we now call the United States of America. In other words, you could say the Israelites were in Mississippi Valley, the Mississippi River Valley, which is this right here, most of the United States. This is called Israel Valley. This is Israel Valley. This is the center spot right here, St. Luce, where Jacob dropped his pillar. All the waterways off of this, Israel's Valley. Israelites lived in these lands. So now when we come back to these Egyptians on the exterior of these buildings in Chicago, Israelites. These were their lands. These are their lands. This is the promised land. And these are them depicted on the buildings still. And that's why we see priests wearing robes. That's why we see the eagle up here engraved in stone. And it's why we see animal sacrifice on altars, because these are the civilizations that used to live here. The Israelites that the Bible talks about, the seed of Abraham and Jacob and Joseph, this is that land. That's why they're all over this architecture. And that's especially why Jacob, or Israel's pillar, still stands in St. Louis, Missouri. And that's why we see the stone woman depicted everywhere on this stone architecture. Because in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, it says, "Thy maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel." Israel is not a country in the Middle East. Israel is Jacob, referring to Jacob's children. The promise that God made with Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, and all of their seed. God is their husband. Thy maker is thine husband, putting them, the Israelites, the people that he covenanted with, in the wife position. He says, "I am married unto you," in Jeremiah 3:14. Malachi 2:14, he calls them the wife of the covenant. He made this covenant with these people. He's married to them. He can't divorce them. He has to keep this promise to them. He's married to them. He's the husband. They're the wife. Revelation 21:9, the Lamb's wife, the sacrificial lamb, Jesus Christ, who was the ultimate sacrifice. The capital Lamb, the capital L-A-M-B, Lamb, is the husband, and his bride, the wife, is the people that he covenanted with, the seed of Abraham and Jacob.